Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Greetings, this is Brian E. Muhammad with Global View on NNV News. Today in Tehran, the Iranian nuclear scientist killed in an ambush on his security caravan outside of Tehran November 27th was laid to rest. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was assassinated in broad daylight and was considered by Western intelligence to be Iran's top nuclear scientist. The scientist headed the Iranian Defense Ministry's Organization of Defensive Innovation and Research and survived previous attempts on his life. Iranian officials blamed the Zionist state of Israel for the killing. Dr. Fakhrizadeh is the latest Iranian scientist killed in what is widely believed to be targeted assassinations by Israel. The killing comes at a time of heightened tensions between Iran, Israel, and the United States. The world community have called on restraint, fearing the killing can escalate further into war between the nations. Iran has suffered several devastating attacks this year, including the killing of top General Qasem Soleimani by a U.S. drone strike in January ordered by President Donald Trump. In other news, the return of at least 16 children and 12 adults to Trinidad following their deportation to Venezuela on November 22nd gives the authorities of Trinidad and Tobago a second chance to uphold domestic and international obligations to provide protection for people seeking asylum and safety from danger. The Venezuelans returned to Trinidad November 24th. More than a dozen rights organizations, including the Caribbean Center for Human Rights and Amnesty International, in an open letter to Prime Minister Keith Rowley, are calling for the government to reunite the children with their families and grant them access to apply for asylum. The organizations are also calling on the authorities to screen and determine if the children have been trafficked and provide them with medical attention. Reports indicate perhaps 50 children have been deported this year, despite the fact that Trinidad and Tobago is a signatory to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which requires countries to act in their best interest and refrain from detaining them or deporting them. To discuss the issue on the ground from Trinidad, we have as our guest Dr. David Muhammad, the Eastern Caribbean representative for the Nation of Islam. Welcome, Dr. Muhammad.
Greetings, Brother Brian. Greetings to all the viewers and listeners. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Brother David, this issue between Venezuela and Trinidad, what is the background of this issue? We know that there has been issues instigated by the United States government, depending on who you listen to, in Venezuela, and so there is, I guess, increased migration. But what is the background going on the ground?
Well, it goes back to approximately 5 years ago with the political conflict under the regime of President Nicolas Maduro. The perception is that a lot of the voices that are protesting his presidency are either pro-American or upper middle class, and that the masses of the people in general, following off from the legacy of President Hugo Chavez, are supporters of the Maduro regime. Now, there has emerged a lot of instability in regards to cost of living and economic problems, so much so that around 2016, there began to be these mass exoduses. As a matter of fact, in one day in July 2016, it was estimated that approximately 100,000 Venezuelans crossed the Colombian border. is after they were given a 12-hour amnesty to leave Venezuela, go over to Colombia, get items, and then go back. You also hear of Venezuelans crossing the Brazilian border, because remember, they are bordered by both Colombia and Brazil, again, to get items and come back. And then, of course, Trinidad and Tobago now is across the so-called Columbus Channel, the body of waters there. So it's been so much of a crisis that it's estimated that as many as close to 100,000 Venezuelans have come into Trinidad. Just about 1/5 of that have been registered. And of course, there's now a lot of jobs, a lot of Venezuelans settling in. Even one of the newspapers started publishing a Spanish edition. There's a lot of catering for the Venezuelan community in Trinidad. And the difference between Trinidad and Tobago, as opposed to, say, Brazil and Colombia, is that Venezuela's population is just under 33 million. Trinidad and Tobago's population is approximately 1.5 million. So that actually runs the risk of Trinidad and Tobago's population being significantly increased with a new percentage, as much as maybe 8 or 9% of the country could be Venezuelan migrants coming in. And then, of course, eventually the Trinidad and Tobago government felt the need to regularize to some degree the presence of the Venezuelans by doing a registration process in 2019, giving a 1-year period. Now, that was destined to not work out efficiently in the first place, because if you have, let's say hypothetically, 60,000 Venezuelan persons in a population of 1.5 million Trinidadians, and their time of being authorized to be in the country expires on the same day at the same time, it would be logistically impossible for 60,000 residents to fly out of a country that has a capacity to probably just have less than 10,000 people leave on any given day. So that was never going to work out in the first place. And then, of course, with COVID-19 earlier this year, it complicated the situation even more, because now that the expiry time is up, some of the deportations have started, as you see.
And there's a couple of questions that come as a result of the numbers. Those shared numbers that you cited are, shocking, actually. Looking at it from the outside, I don't know if people, really realize the magnitude. The first question on that is, what has been the concerns from everyday people in Trinidad on the ground? Naturally, when you have this kind of influx of people coming from another country, there's a natural reaction to the people on the ground. Can you talk about that some?
Right. Well, first of all, broadly speaking, generally speaking, anytime there is the meeting of two different cultures, that new accommodation arrangement is ushered in with a whole series of myths, stereotypes, and misrepresentations of the culture, traditions, and behavioral practices of those people. So needless to say, with the growing Venezuelan population, there is the mass hysterical circulation of stereotypes, and this, of course, adds fear. And when you have fear in relation to the presence of an ethnic group, it becomes xenophobia. And then there's a reaction to that. So, of course, there are the labeling stereotypes of gangs and guns and drugs being brought in and prostitution, etc. As if we didn't have enough of those problems all across the Caribbean anyway. But there has been, in some pockets, reactions to the presence of the Venezuelan community. But I would say, though, again, looking at it from a much broader picture, in our Caribbean societies in general, there's never been any widespread reluctance to welcome the presence of any other ethnic group except maybe our own. And this brings me to our number one concern over this matter, which is while we, I mean, the Nation of Islam and the wider community organization that we've established, the Black Agenda Project, I mean, just as a Muslim, we believe in the humanitarian treatment of all peoples, regardless of race, color, creed, or class. We believe wholeheartedly in the respect and preservation of dignity of a peoples and the preservation of human rights and civil rights, and especially when it comes to women and children. We strongly believe that this humanitarian approach should be a first priority in the treatment of peoples, regardless of what the law says. But having said that, we have to ask the question, what about the Africans from Africa? Because for more than 10, 15, 20 years in Trinidad and Tobago, and even other parts of the Caribbean for that matter, there has been a complete disregard for the human rights and civil rights of our brothers and sisters who have come in particular from Ghana and Nigeria. And what makes that even worse is one, we have a historical connection to the west coast of Africa, because most of the African people in the Caribbean came from the Igbo, the Yoruba, and the Xhosa tribes from West Africa, as well as the Mandingo and the Congo and the Fulani and the Asante. But to make that even worse, there's always this over promotion of the Caribbean region, and in particular Trinidad and Guyana, as these cosmopolitan, multicultural, multi-ethnic societies. But yet still, Black people in Trinidad are by far more socially intermixed and integrated with Africans from Africa than we are socially intermixed into any existing ethnic group inside of Trinidad. So, for example, you're more likely to see Ghanaians and Nigerians intermarrying with Trinidadians who are of African descent than you will see Chinese Trinidadians marrying African Trinidadians, or white Trinidadians or Syrian Trinidadians marrying African Trinidadians. So if we have become more integrated within the African community and we have African-based governments, then how come there's not the same public outcry for the treatment of the Africans from Africa when they go through the same kind of thing? Africans from Africa.
You're saying that there is a double standard from the government of Trinidad in terms of the treatment of Venezuelans versus Africans?
The double standard more lies in the national identity of us as Caribbean societies, where we tend to take this pride in cosmopolitanism. Fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But the Ghanaians and Nigerians, they come to places like Trinidad. They get married here. They have children here. They start families here. And they start to work and live a decent, honest, law-abiding life. The Syrians in Trinidad are not going to marry any Black people. The whites in Trinidad are not going to marry any Black people. And maybe there are one or two cases of the whites doing it, definitely not the Syrians. But when that is done, in proportion, it is minuscule compared to the amount of Ghanaians and Nigerians who intermix and intermarry. So if that is the case, to snatch these people out of their homes, separate from them, from their families, deny their children the rights to be with their parents. And then now, not a word said, but in Trinidad now we have 16 social groups that have come together to condemn the treatment of the Venezuelan people. And I stand with them. I support them in that. However, I ask again, what about the Africans from Africa who many times are languishing in these prisons called detention centers for several months, sometimes a year or 2 years, until they're forced on a flight to go back to Africa? As a matter of fact, in 2014, there was a horrific case where a newspaper in Trinidad made mockery of our African brothers and sisters by leading a headline entitled "Back to Africa, where the government chartered a plane to send 16 African migrants, costing millions of dollars, to send them back to Africa with 12 air marshals and court sessions that went overnight. Imagine a court case starting sometime 10 o'clock in the evening that finished at 5 o'clock the next morning while a plane is on the tarmac at the airport waiting anxiously to remove these Africans, many of whom would have, of course, already had their ties in the Black community in Trinidad. But nothing said about these things. And I think we have become too comfortable and complacent with the divide and rule after effects on us as African people. We've become so accustomed to the fragmentation and destruction of our social units and associations that we just sit back and silently observe those continuing to exercise those practices against us. But it's something that we need to become a lot more sensitive to in this day and time.
Wow. Now, with the last question on Trinidad, and maybe we'll talk a few minutes on, this situation in Iran. The government, what has been the response to this whole situation? I know you raised the point about the Africans, this kind of double standard that's there. But on the issue of the Venezuelans, what has been, some of the opposition groups or leaders, for example, is this a bone of contention politically for the present government, for example?
Well, it has been, but there tends to be this inter-regime continuation of drama and issues constitutionally that are perpetual arguments. So that is never going to stop. But many social movements, of course, have lifted their voices in compassion and concern for the Venezuelan people. And it has become quite an issue. Of course, most of the attention is being paid to the children and the breakup of families, which again, we need to be a bit more compassionate about that. But let me just make one final point about immigration in general. When we look at immigration law internationally, an argument can be advanced to suggest that all immigration law has been racist at the root. All immigration law. Because the earliest immigration laws that we can think of really came out of the first Black republic being Haiti. When Haiti established their constitution on January the 1st, 1804, it was incorporated legislatively that any person of African descent who was enslaved under the criminal, brutal denial of human rights system called slavery and the genocidal practices that we were victims of, any African from anywhere in the world who was enslaved, who arrives on the shores of Haiti, is one, immediately free, and two, automatically a Haitian citizen. And that was 1804. And that was an immigration breakthrough in legislation that laid a foundation for the kind of ideology that we should have practiced when we became independent. America's first immigration laws go back to 1882, which is 78 or 76 years after Haiti, when Chester Arthur was the president of the United States. And this came at a time where the Emancipation Proclamation was already declared. You had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution, where they were trying to wrestle with exactly what kind of social standing and status that Black people in America should have. So the quote-unquote slaves were freed. Then the slaves were made citizens. Then the slaves were given a right to vote, but they were still seen as slaves. Hence, we were 3/5 of a human being, according to that same constitution. And all of the amendments to the American Immigration Act were designed around keeping certain races and ethnic groups out, but also persons of particular ideologies, in particular communism, and much later on, Islam. So The United Kingdom have transformed their immigration laws based on race and ethnicity. Again, right after World War II, when they needed to rebuild, they invited in residents from the Commonwealth, in particular Caribbean countries, as well as African and Middle Eastern countries. And there was an influx. And then when the diamond-shaped social structure retransformed into the capitalist triangular-shaped social structure, then they wanted to close the borders. And under Margaret Thatcher, they passed the immigration laws again in 1973. And then she made this famous statement where just because a rat has babies in an oven, you won't call them biscuits, suggesting that if Black people from Africa are born in Europe, they're not European, they're still Africans. But what are we doing here? And the thing is, the reason that Europe has wealth is because they went into Africa. So as Dr. Walter Rodney raises the question in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, how come all of the world's resources are in Africa, but the bulk of the world's money is in Europe? And the money in Europe was not generated from mineral wealth or resources that came out of Europe. So all across the board, immigration laws have historically been established to address the shifts and rebalances in power. You cannot define what racism truly is if you leave out the word power. And racism is something that is practiced by the powerful over the powerless as a result of their not having a connection or a relationship with the means and forces of production. And now I say all of that to say, if there began a cascading effect of independence being granted to Caribbean nations from 1962, then our immigration laws are supposed to be sensitive in the same way that Europe and America had immigration laws to preserve and protect their best economic interests. Our immigration laws should be established in such a way to preserve and protect our heritage, cultural, and social interests. And by the fact that we have treated Africans from Africa in this way shows that there's still a very strong colonial presence in our thinking as it comes to our legislation and our constitution. And finally, when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan traveled throughout the Caribbean and met with so many heads of government, prime ministers, and opposition leaders, he shared the idea of a federalism, a United States of the Caribbean, one whereby in the reconsideration of our status as individual nation states in relation to other nation states, there should be somewhat of a removal of border restrictions as it pertains to us interacting with each other as family members. How could you set up walls and block off the doorways in a house where you live with your relatives, where your integration and social cooperation is absolutely necessary for your success? And here we have laws that are largely replicating the same template of our former colonial masters, which has us simply running around in circles and reproducing powerlessness among the Black masses, while the white Caribbean minorities are empowered and are literally put in a position of dominance that is similar to how the white minority in South Africa ruled over the Black majority.
Wow. Wow. So it just continues and continues and continues.
That's right.
It perpetuates itself. Wow. Now, I know you have a time limit today with us, so I want to, ask you also, give you a chance to comment on, Iran. Things seems to be escalating. Friday, as we reported, there was an assassination of what the U.S. and Western intelligence is claiming to be the top nuclear scientists. And there was a spat of these assassinations of scientists over the years. I wanted to get your thoughts on Iran, especially right now with this volatile and the role of Israel. The Iranian officials have squarely blamed the Zionist state of Israel and Mossad of orchestrating this act. What do you think?
Well, ever since January with the ordering of the drone strike against Iran and the killing of Qasem Soleimani, it has appeared that there are efforts afoot to provoke some kind of unrest that can be used as an excuse to wage all-out war. Recently, the Final Call newspaper, of course, reported that there are concerns even within the various governmental military departments in Europe that there seems to be some last-minute effort. Of course, not wanting to speak about this too much, but the presidency of Donald Trump is not yet officially over. And there is still a wide range of decisions that can be made within a presidential capacity up to the inauguration in January 2021. So the concern here now is that, is there going to be a last-ditch attempt to reestablish some of the policies that would have been a follow-up to, for example, the travel ban on the 7 Muslim-dominant countries, and also the establishment of Jerusalem as a capital, replacing Tel Aviv, which has come across as one of the most contentious and grievous international political decisions that have been made in a very long time. The assassination of Soleimani, and a tone along with overtones of an Israeli supremacy within the region that, again, none of this can be looked at as isolated incidents. But they say a picture says 1,000 words. One of the greatest images, just one visual picture, can be shown to sum up all of this that has happened. And that picture would be 2 side-by-side maps: Israel in 1947 and Israel in 2020. And if you include 8 additional images in between that, so you have progressive expansion of the size of Israel from 1947 to the Six-Day War, 1967 to the Middle East oil crisis, 1973. Every time any kind of conflict takes place in the Middle East involving Israel, its territory gets bigger geographically, and the Muslim countries' geographical territory gets smaller. And this comes with an excuse and a justification, and I dare say by extension, a censorship, that even if you say certain things that would challenge the legitimacy of the expansion of Israeli territory, you could even be banned on social media. And that is why there are 17 countries on earth today, including France, Spain, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Greece, and Israel themselves, where it is against the law, it is a criminal offense to deny the Jewish Holocaust. The ideology of respecting the history of the Jewish Holocaust is directly related to the expansion of geographical territory today. The two cannot be separated. And when we say denial, we're not talking about saying it did not happen or it did not exist. No, denial, according to the law in those 17 countries, follows 3 criteria. 1, to say that the objective of the Nazi Germany regime was to deport the Jews rather than annihilate them. 2, to suggest that gas chambers were not involved, because one theory is that gas chambers, many of the gas chambers, were built in 1946 onwards, when, of course, the World War II ended in 1945. And the 3rd criteria is anyone who suggests that the number of Jews who were victims of genocide under the Holocaust was significantly less than 6 million. Those 3 criteria amount to Jewish Holocaust denial. Now, Imagine, Black people have been the victims of the worst Holocaust ever. But there are no laws in place. Are we even going to have the discussion to begin the conversation about criminalizing denial of the African Holocaust? Because we are still being told, get over it. That was in the past. Forget it. It wasn't this bad. It wasn't that bad. And we have this awful habit of comparing the African Holocaust to slavery or servitude, where persons were simply engaged in labor. No, we were victims of rape, murder, torture, dehumanization, unlawful transfer, etc. So, coming back to Israel, they have been successful in getting every single country on earth, every single regime, regardless of what your religion is, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, or any other ideology in between, you have to respect the history of the Jews. And with that now, it takes away any potential argument to challenge the kind of contemporary apartheid that's taking place in Israel and the surrounding of its borders. So now that the whole world is literally handcuffed, tape over the mouth, censored from even sharing opinions about these things, because you can even be banned on social media very swiftly and very easily for having the wrong kinds of conversations about these types of issues. It opens up a doorway, and then we have had this regime in the United States of America that has been so pro-Israel. And now we're seeing these last few weeks or last couple months of this presidency, we're concerned that there may be an attempt to heighten these tensions and conflict to bring about some kind of perpetual unrest that, of course, Mr. Biden going in would have to deal with.
Yes, sir. Well, Brother David, we thank you once again for taking the time to be with us. And of course, we always look forward to speaking to you. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Yes,
you know, and there's a lot to discuss. There's a whole lot to
absolutely.
discuss, whether it's in the Caribbean or anywhere else in the world. But we thank you for taking the time, as always, to be with us.
Well, thank you so much. And let me thank NNV News and the great work that they've been doing. I mean, providing a breath of fresh air in the void and vacuum of relevant content in the media in general. So, Brother Brian E. Muhammad, I want to thank you and congratulate you for the great work. And of course, our beloved brother Michael Muhammad and all those involved in this team to bring us this great information.
Thank you. So, we want to, from our network, we want to talk for a few minutes about the work that we're doing at NNV and why such a platform is so important, especially in the work of international news and international affairs. I want to say to our listeners and to our viewers who are with us, and we thank you for you taking the time to be with us, whether you're watching this live or you'll be watching this on a platform that we air on. We want to thank you and for your support. And I want to say the importance of global news, especially for Black people. We are a international people because we come from the framework that we are the original people of the earth. And being the original people of the earth, we are the natural owners of this earth. And so we should be concerned about what is going on in other countries. You may say, well, I'm in the hood. I'm in my community. I'm not concerned about what goes on in Tehran or Nigeria or Ghana or any other place around the world. That should not be my concern. But it is your concern because at the root of many of the problems that we find going on throughout the earth, you find somewhere in the mix the United States government and its errant, wicked foreign policy. And a policy that is not about freedom, justice, and equality. Although the United States, no matter what administration is in power, have always took the position that the United States is a country or a nation of exceptionalism. You know, this thing called American exceptionalism, you know, and it has been proven that America has been everything but exceptional around the world. And this is why you see the level of upset directed at the United States. And again, this is not just about Donald Trump. It's not just about an incoming administration, but all of the administrations of this government have proved to be on many occasions on the wrong side of freedom, on the wrong side of justice, and certainly on the wrong side of equality. And so, and many of the people who are affected are people in what they call the darker nations, you know, the third world, even the language third world. You know, think about that. How could we be the third world and be the first people on this planet? Because the priority has been to keep themselves from Europe, white America. All of this has been designed to keep them in the power position. So you see a world in turmoil now. And at the center of that turmoil is the survival of the European, who's at a zero birth rate, who is concerned that by the year 2047 in the United States that they will be the minority, you know? And this is the same statistics that is coming out of Europe. Every of those countries where they are the majority, there's a fear based on real statistics that they have done that they will be the minority. They are concerned about their future. I'm saying that NNV is a network that is designed so that we can lift up the concern about our future, because we also have a future on this planet. And so why is global view so important? Because you are a global people. I heard Jesse Jackson say one time many years ago, he said, our coming into slavery, our being here in the United States was an act of foreign policy. It was the foreign policy of Europeans to use us as free labor. This is why the United States is the #1 economy in the world. Even with the downslide based on the coronavirus, since earlier this year, the hit that the economy took, the United States is still in the #1 position. Who put her there? It was 300 years of free labor based on a foreign policy position that brought you and I into this country to be made slaves. So, put it in that context, we can understand why Black people should be concerned with foreign policy. Black people should be concerned with what is going on in Africa, what is going on in the Caribbean, what is going on in what they call the Middle East? What is going on in the Far East? Because all of that is ours. All of that belongs to us originally. Circumstances have made it otherwise. So here on Global View, on this network of NNV News, this is an outlet where we can not only just celebrate Black life, but deal with the serious issues that are going on that affect us, whether it's found in cities across this country or whether it's found in capitals across the world. It's important that we have this discussion. So we want to make sure that we're on the right course with you as viewers, and we invite you to let us know how we are doing. Let us know what it is that you want to see on a show dealing with international affairs. You can simply write us and let us know at contact@nnvnews.com. contact@nnvnews.com. We want to hear from you. We want to know that we respect you and we respect your time to view us. And we want to know from you how we can be better at what we do. We will clean up all kinks in the armor, all chinks in the armor, as they say. We will do everything we can to bring you quality programming, quality content with people and guests who can make these very nuanced issues of the world easy to understand. That's our goal, to make it. We know that we're not, it may sound very complicated when we talk about, assassinations of nuclear scientists or other issues that are going on that has a background story to it that we must know. But we'll try to make it as uncomplicated as we can. This is the goal of NNV News. This is the goal of Global View. So we want to thank you for listening to our words today, but we thought that it was important for us to come to you and begin to appeal from you how we can do better and let you know why this is so relevant in today's world. My last point, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan once said that the currency of the Nation of Islam, and we're saying that the Nation of Islam under his leadership, the greatest currency that we can give you, the viewers, and bring to this network of NNV is right guidance. This is what we will continue to strive to do from this platform, right guidance. Because this is what the world needs. This is what the world is suffering from the lack of. And this is what we intend to be dedicated to give. Thank you for taking the time. And again, you can let us know, contact us, contact@nnvnews.com. You can also leave comments in the comment section below, and keep up with us on all of the platforms that we air our programming on. We thank you. God bless each and every one of you.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.